Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren,
Ladies and gentlemen, a cordial welcome to the Investors and Analysts Conference on the occasion of the presentation of the mid-year results of Wienerberger. As usual, our CEO, Mr. Scheuch, and CFO, Willy van Riet, are going to present the developments of the first 6 months of the year and then answer your questions. If you want to put questions, please use a microphone. Otherwise, people listening via the internet can't hear you. So before I hand over to Mr. Scheuch, I'd like to remind you of the Capital Markets Day on the 10th and 11th of September in Brussels, in Belgium. You will obtain a comprehensive strategy update there and also inform you about our operations. We will be visiting a showroom as an example of how we market our products abroad, and we will also be visiting a clay block plant near Brussels. If you want to register for the Capital Markets Day, please contact either myself or one of my colleagues. You will find our contact data on our website. Mr. Scheuch, you have the floor. Thank you, Klaus, for your introduction. On behalf of Willy and myself, I'd like to wish you a pleasant morning. Belgium, ladies and gentlemen, is not only a country of excellent cuisine, it's also the home country of our CFO, and he will be in charge of the cooking there. He's not only cooking balance sheet figures, but also excellent meals, so he's going to be our chef there. So, on a more serious note, our mid-year results, we will be walking you through these results as usual. During the first half of the year, we were doing good business, strong organic growth. Latecomers are welcome. So we had a 7% revenue growth and an EBITDA growth of 27% in an environment in Europe which was decidedly mixed. But our most important statement really is that we were able to generate strong, sound organic growth. Clay building materials in Europe, the most important segment for us, showed a good development in terms of prices and also in terms of performance. Pipelife was doing well in its core markets. The core markets of Pipelife are Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Excellent development. Pipelife was outperforming the market there. The market environment was difficult in France and the Netherlands, two other core markets of Pipelife, but the business was going well in Austria and Eastern Europe. At the beginning of the year, we told you that international project business in the crude oil segment, the natural gas industry, that is long pipes with a large diameter and also flexible pipes for applications into the natural gas industry. In these applications, we saw record results in 2013, and at the beginning of the year, we already expected a decline. This decline happened, unfortunately, but we are confident as far as the second half of the year is concerned because there are already projects, international projects coming up. Steinzeug Keramo is doing well with its ceramic pipes in Europe, satisfactory results and also revenues. Semmelrock with concrete pavers, mainly in Central and Eastern Europe, operating in a difficult environment. Nevertheless, double-digit growth and an increase in earnings, which shows that the development is going in the right direction. In North America, we had a difficult half year because of the long winter. We had a decrease in earnings and a flexible pricing policy, which was already launched last year and is being continued this year. That leads to the decrease in earnings. The second quarter of 2014 is satisfactory because business in Eastern Europe is growing, both in the brick segment and in pipes. Western Europe, because of the mild winter, construction projects were started very early, and that had an impact on the second quarter. The processing industry is not adding capacities. Companies do have full order books, but they are not recruiting additional staff. In Germany, Belgium, and other Western European countries, for example. But I am confident that markets which are developing well will show a positive trend in the second half of the year. Our revenues throughout the group have remained stable in the second quarter, and EBITDA has gone up by 3%. By way of summary, revenues plus 7% to 1.3 billion, EBITDA plus 27% to 135 million in the second half of 2014. And in the first half of the year, we succeeded in bringing the net debt of the company down by 100 million, more than 100 million. And I think you know our business well enough to understand that despite the build-up of working capital in the first half of the year, we succeeded in bringing our net debt down. Total investments were slightly higher than the year before because a number of investments originally planned for 2013 were postponed into 2014 because 2013 was not a particularly good year. And a number of plants were started up again, or production lines were started up again. In the United Kingdom, for example, preparatory measures had to be taken, and that also costs money. An important strategic milestone in the development of Wienerberger is the acquisition of Tondach Kleinstetten. As regards the structure of the transaction, we pay the two private family trusts that have held a 50% stake, 19.4 million in cash, and treasury shares in the amount of 23.4 million. The banks that have an exposure to Tondach are going to participate with a stake of 18%. We have an option to buy that stake. The new ownership structure is Wienerberger holding 82%, banks holding 18%. Tondach Kleinstetten is a leading producer of clay roof tiles in Eastern Europe, 15 production sites in 8 countries, revenues in 2013 around 150 million, EBITDA 20 million. We hope to increase revenues to 155 million, EBITDA up to 23 million. This is what we expect for the full year 2014. And the net debt that will be passed over to Wienerberger will be 60 million. After the restructuring measures, which we already took in 2013, we've returned to the growth path with Tondach Kleinstetten in 2014. This is an important step for us because it's important for our market position. It strengthens us in the core markets in Eastern Europe, both in the roof segment and in the wall segment. we expect an EBITDA potential of 35 million, not on a short-term basis, but on a medium-term basis for the coming years, depending on economic developments. Wienerberger has thus strengthened its basis in the renovation market, and we expect potential synergies in the amount of 3 million. But, of course, we will try and further increase the synergies. So much by way of introduction, and with this I hand over to Willi for the details. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Here are the results for the first half of 2014. Revenues up by 7%, operating EBITDA plus 27%, and an operating EBITDA margin of 10% compared with 8.4% in the first half of 2013. Depreciation has remained almost the same, and that gives us a positive EBIT of 33.5 million compared with 4.9 million the year before. Now, a quick overview of the income statement. Income from investments in associates, a considerable improvement. Where does that come from? Associates are mainly Tondach, which until the 30th of June 2014 was consolidated at equity in the amount of 50%. And the second associate is a German company, our German company. The results have remained stable. The improvement is mainly due to the operating improvement in Tondach in the first half of the year. Interest and similar income, flat development, same holds for interest and similar expenses. Interest expenses, of course, are burdened by the negative carry which we have through a high cash position. The bond which we floated in 2013 in order to redeem the bond in 2014. Now the redemption was already made in July this year, and the negative carry will go down significantly in the second half of the year. Other financial results, a small plus compared with a small minus in the previous period. So we have a profit before tax of 4.5 million compared with the loss before tax the previous period. We are still paying taxes in certain countries, particularly in Western European and Nordic countries, where we have always been making a profit, and therefore we are paying taxes there. So we have a profit, or rather a loss after tax of 1.7 million compared with a loss of 31 million the year before. So a significant improvement, mainly due to our operating result. We have strong organic volume growth in the first half of the year. This does not include any consolidation effects, plus 8% in volume throughout the group. 1% price increase. I will tell you more about that later on. In a difficult market environment in the first half of 2014. And minus 2% FX effect. That is mainly due to the exchange rate against the ruble, the Norwegian crown, and the Turkish lira. So the strength of the euro against other currency. The only positive effect is the British pound, but nevertheless minus 2% FX effect. Average prices in clay building materials have taken a satisfactory development. We have been able to increase prices over and above cost inflation, although Italy and the Netherlands were still a difficult market environment. Heimo Scheuch will tell you more about that later. Nevertheless, we succeeded in implementing significant price increases. In Eastern Europe, average prices are stable in a market environment that is still very challenging. But at least we are compensating for cost increases, for cost inflation. In North America, there is still considerable price pressure in a number of regional brick markets. This is what we expected already at the beginning of the year. In Pipe Life, we are continuously managing prices there to cover the volatile raw material costs. Some of these volatile costs could be passed on to customers, but not all of them. So it's almost a zero-sum game. The restructuring program that was started in 2012 and which provided for cuts in back office operations and plant closures in the Western European markets, mainly Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and France. We said that by 2014 we wanted to generate a contribution of 50 million to the results. 17 million were provided for 2014. We've already realized 11 million, and I'm confident that the remaining 6 million will be realized by the end of the year. The second part of this plan is to sell non-operating assets in the amount of up to 100 million by 2016. We did so already in 2012 and 2013. We are now continuing. Normally, this is something that has a stronger impact on the second half of the year than the first half of the year because projects need to be approved, negotiated, and so on. We have already realized proceeds of 3.3 million. That is an EBITDA contribution of 2.4 million, similar to last year. Results by segment broken down by revenue and EBITDA. Clay building materials in Western Europe account for the biggest contribution to EBITDA. But the other segments as well have performed well. Eastern Europe has seen an improvement in clay building materials, pipes slightly down because of the lack of special international projects, but pipes and pavers generally contributed to the business. North America, we had a very difficult, hard winter in the United States and in Canada, and that, of course, had an impact on the results. A breakdown by product. This shows the strength of Wienerberger products and the strength of Wienerberger as such. We have a broad product portfolio. We're going to further expand the portfolio through the addition of Tondach. Wall products contribute 22% to revenues and 23% to EBITDA. Roof products, 34% contribution to EBITDA. This is not just new housing construction, but also renovation. Facade products, 20% contribution to EBITDA thanks to a recovery in the Western European market. Pipes contribute 1/3, both to EBITDA and revenues. So we have a differentiated portfolio, all components of which contribute according to their capacities. EBITDA changes by segment. Clay building materials, Western Europe, plus 23.6%, almost 10 million, plus 10 million in Western Europe. Pipes and pavers, slightly down in Western Europe because there were no special projects in Norway. But on the whole, despite a difficult market environment, the situation improved. Pipes and pavers in Eastern Europe, a strong development. North America, because of inclement weather conditions, a weaker development than the year before, and holding and others, a slight cost increase. I move on to cash flow development. As you know, I always talk about cash flow a lot. Our gross cash flow, that is based on organic growth, plus 26 million over 2013. Change in working capital, we invested less. We were doing better business, so less build-up of working capital. Normal CapEx, a slight increase already at the beginning of the year. And divestment and other lower than the period before. And a significant increase by 43 million in free cash flow. So what remains in terms of net cash flow is plus 41 million after dividend and hybrid coupon. We had no growth investments yet in the first half of the year. Something will be coming in the second half of the year, plus Tondach, of course. A build-up in working capital due to seasonality of the business. As you know, we are building working capital until the mid-year, and then working capital goes down again. An increase in inventories because business was recovering. We had higher revenues. Stocks you don't have, you can't sell. You have to plan in time. It's really a good sign because more stocks means more sales. Trade receivables lower than the year before. Last year, there was a lot towards the end of the second quarter. This year, it's spread more evenly over the 2 quarters. Trade payables, practically the same. Other net current assets, we had a cash out in 2010 because of the restructuring costs. We had set up provisions at the end of 2012. And there was a cash out in that amount in 2013, but altogether a significant improvement in working capital. Total investments, a slight increase by almost 10 million. Where does that come from? That was on schedule. We gave you a guidance of higher cash out for investments. Those were projects that had been postponed from the end of 2013 to the first half of 2014. I'd like to underline again that we're talking about total investments here, including improvements, including technological developments in our production processes and production innovation. It's not merely maintenance or replacement investment. So whenever we do a project, an investment project, we look at the situation as a whole and make improvements to the plant concerned. Development of net debt. One thing is quite clear: the gross cash flow and the build-up of working capital. Those are the 2 main items. The rest is clear: dividend payment, hybrid coupon, etc. And this also explains the increase in net debt compared with the 31st of December 2012. We still have a very strong balance sheet, a good equity position, a good level of net debt. We're better now than we were in 2013, and an increase in working capital in the first half of the year of 151.8 million. We have a balanced term structure. We have the cash to redeem the bond on schedule. For 2015, we will try and raise funding. as needed. And as usual, we are going to be proactive in this respect. The Treasury ratios net debt to operating EBITDA of 2.3 compared with 3.2 last year. As you know, our ratios, our mid-year ratios are poorer than the year-end ratios because of working capital, and I'm confident that even with the Tondach acquisition, we are going to be clearly below 2.5 times net debt to operating EBITDA. So this is all. We are in a comfortable position. Back to Heimo.
Thank you very much, Willi. Let's take a look at the segments. CBM, Clay Building Materials, Western Europe. We had an organic growth. In Western Europe, 11% EBITDA, very good, 45%, 75 million. The margin is up to 13.3%, so this is very satisfactory for the first half of the year. Volume increase has been achieved in all product groups, in all markets. The market recovery in new residential construction in the United Kingdom results also from the improved economic environment in the United Kingdom. So we also could achieve price increases. So we could supply the UK market from Belgium and the Netherlands. And they became the second largest sellers of bricks, and we outperformed the local companies, and some of the mothballed plants will be reopened, so this should help us keep and maintain our position. On the continent, however, we had a varied development. Let's take a look at Belgium. It differed from the rest of Europe here. Residential building is better than elsewhere. I will talk about that later on. Netherlands, France, Italy, however, showed significant declines in new residential construction. Thanks to our product and price policy, though, we could distinguish ourselves from our competitors. The same holds true for Germany. Germany shows a mixed picture regarding housing starts. The reason is that there is a more stable development when it comes to 1- and 2-family houses, no high growth rates. But in urban construction, we have significant growth rates. So summing up, we can say that Germany builds more apartments than houses. And therefore, we see that it's urban construction that dominates. Price increases could be achieved as a result of the overall product portfolio and the product mix, and also there were optimization measures which are in accordance with our plans. The savings that we had actually expected for this year explain the 11 million that we could save in the first half of the year. Eastern Europe, again, positive, more positive than the overall market development. As compared with last year, we had a positive trend in Poland with a slight growth of about 5%. The situation in Austria and Romania and Russia is stable. Again, there were decreases in the 1- and 2-family housing sector in Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia and Hungary. We had higher capacity utilization, and our product policy also meant that we had an 83% increase in EBITDA to 22 million. Pipes and pavers, Western Europe. Here we have strong Nordic markets, As I've indicated already, there was a very positive development there. Pipelife outperformed the competitors, particularly in the infrastructure sector. Significant positive development in the Nordic countries, France and the Netherlands, a difficult market environment. So we had to really struggle in the infrastructure sector because there is less public expenditure in these areas in France and the Netherlands. I should also mention that in the international project business, this comes mostly from Nordic countries. It's a very strong business. And here we have seen a decrease which could not be compensated for by the Nordic markets. Steinzeug-Keramo, here developments were in accordance with our plans. In Germany, in Eastern Europe, we had significant growths and price increases. Eastern Europe, again, a very pleasant situation, which confirms our strategy, which focuses not only on new housing projects, but also on renovation, on the infrastructure markets. We could increase our revenues in Eastern Europe. Poland shows a very positive development both for semi-rock, pipeline, and the other products. And semi-rock has been able to gain market shares, which is a very positive development considering the market environment. In this context, I would also like to point out that as a company, we have been able to move from the commodity segment where there's keen competition as regards prices. We offer premium products, and therefore our earnings were better in Europe. North America, it has already been mentioned that there was a slow start due to weather conditions. The second quarter is clearly better, double-digit volume growth for bricks. When it comes to prices, we still find that there is regional pressure. And this, of course, is reflected in the results. So there was a negative impact. However, we assume that we will be able to cope with this price pressure, which is going to last throughout the year, though. However, there has also been increased demand in some of the regional markets, so we had to start up new production lines, which means starting costs, and this has also contributed to the negative effect in the first half of the year in North America. Let's come to the outlook for the entire year. I'd like to point out that at the beginning of the year, we have communicated our expectations and assumptions. So let me just focus on the deviations from these forecasts. 8 months later, we've seen a much better development of the British market, which is due to a government initiative in part, but also there is more construction going on. Let me just give you a comparison. We're not discussing whether there's a boom or not. In 2007, housing starts in the UK were about 190,000 units. This was a record low in Europe. We said that, the United Kingdom was not having enough construction activity. During the crisis, the figure dropped to below 100,000. Today, we probably will reach 160,000. So we have not yet reached the level that existed before the crisis. So there is still potential growth. And the population of the United Kingdom is growing. So this will also mean additional requirements for housing. Development in the United Kingdom is positive. I don't pretend to know it all, but actually we have not only Scotland and England, but we also have the area around London, which is comparable to Singapore and other major urban regions where real estate prices are crazy. And you have the rest of the country where things are more normal. Let's turn to the continent. Belgium, very positive development, also thanks to incentives from the government, particularly in Flanders. When you look at the home country of Willy, this is the region where actually construction is concentrated. So, by and large, a very sound, solid basis in Belgium. Poland, as already mentioned, a slight increase from a low level last year, so the situation is altogether satisfactory. And we assume that this trend will continue. The German-speaking area, Germany, above all, is stable, multi-story buildings rather than one or two family houses. Therefore, Wienerberger's strategy focuses more and more on multi-story buildings with new products, bricks in particular. So we expect our activities to increase in this segment. A more difficult situation when it comes to housing starts were the Netherlands, a negative result, minus 15%. At the beginning of the year, our expectations were more positive. France also suffers from an overall economic problems, and there is a negative trend in the building industry as well. Italy, of course, is no surprise, but still a significant decrease from a low level. Eastern Europe, here the Czech Republic and Slovakia show a negative trend, and Hungary also has decreased from a low level, a very low level. This is the environment, the market environment that we have to live with, and we have learned to live with it. You can see that even here, organic growth is possible. Let's take a look at the American market. We were slightly more positive than the 10%, but actually the forecast was 30%. We had to revise these forecasts. We had a good growth rate of 10%, but still it was lower than originally expected. Altogether, we can see a slight growth in Europe, new housing starts, and a solid situation in North America. We've talked a lot about other products, the roof sector, for instance, as well, where we are now very strong with the takeover of Tondach. The renovation market in Europe is very important. It's more positive, a bit more friendly, and we will be able to benefit from this development. Let's take a look at the individual segments for the second half of the year, or the total year 2014. We expect a moderate volume increase for CBM Europe. Price increases should compensate for cost inflation. Our cost reduction programs are according to plan. We will be able to realize more than 17 million. and the consolidation contribution from Tondach starting in July will mean 90 million for revenues and 15 million for EBITDA. So we have clear revenue and earnings increases. North America, in the brick sector, we will have double-digit volume growth. Pricing policy will have to be more flexible, so there will be no additional price erosion. Rather, we will maintain the price level for the remainder of the year, and we expect this solid growth to continue in Canada. We have Arriscraft, which has a very good position, particularly in the Toronto region. And there's a slight decrease, and this will also impact revenues. Pipe Life here, we have made investments in Arkansas. We want to focus on the southern states, and we see stable development of earnings. So we expect a nearly stable earnings development. Pipe Life, as I've already mentioned, there are two problem markets in terms of demand, France and the Netherlands. This will impact the results for the entire year. I've mentioned international projects business. We will not be able to achieve the record figures of last year, but we expect next year to show stable positive demand. This year we will have a slight earnings decrease. Steinzeug-Keramo, no big news. We have slight revenue growth, and Semmelrock also shows positive volume growth. So the total outlook, and it's not conservative, rather it should be viewed in light of the development of the markets from Wienerberger management's perspective. We have tried to gain 10 million contribution to EBITDA from real estate sales. Group EBITDA will be 315 million. We should have a 1.5% price increase, which should cover a cost inflation. Normal investments, 130 million, slightly higher than last year. This is due to the opening up of new capacities. Growth investments, on the one hand, we have the acquisition of Tondach and the expansion of Pipe Life USA, amounting to 48 million. Depreciation, 210 million. We don't see any major changes in the working capital. Changes will be in line with revenue developments. There should be no big surprises. The interest result is 55 million, cost savings 17 million. So we have a very homogeneous result. We are on the way to growth in the markets where we are active today, whether they are good, positive, or not. This is something we leave other people to say. We are working in these markets. We are glad to do so. We are gaining market shares with our products and our innovations. Our diversification and restructuring strategy has shown that we can achieve improved results, and we will follow this course consistently in the coming years. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are looking forward to questions from your side.
Ich hätte eine Frage.
I have a question regarding residential construction activities in Europe. In slide 34, you mentioned the Netherlands, France, and Italy, where your expectations regarding residential constructions had to be reduced. Now, my question to you is, the cost-cutting programs are arriving at their end in 2014. Are there any markets where you may have to adjust capacities in 2015, or are you satisfied with what you have done so far? Well, we reacted very early. 18 months ago, we put the program together, and at that time already, we foresaw that this might be a negative development in one or the other market, and we adjusted capacities in these countries. Now we find ourselves in a situation in which markets can be covered well, even at a lower demand level. Netherlands, for example, we can relocate capacities to the United Kingdom, so we are rather flexible there. Of course, costs will always be at the focus of our attention, and we are relatively fast and flexible in adjusting costs. But I don't think, from today's point of view, that we will need another major restructuring program. My second question concerns volume developments in the second quarter. It appears that sales volumes in the first half of the year were mainly accounted for by the first quarter. What have been the developments in the third quarter so far? I'm not refusing to give you a specific answer. Of course, we are looking at sales figures in all product segments on a daily or weekly basis, but you should never make the mistake of drawing conclusions for the full year. Quarterly reporting is important, but on that basis, you should never speculate on longer periods. We take it that the full year, no matter whether the start was good or bad, whether weather conditions in the autumn are going to be good or bad, our guidance, 315 million EBITDA, is for the year as a whole. In recent weeks, we have not seen anything that would mean a deviation from this guidance. If it's going to be a very mild winter, people will start building earlier or go on building longer. In some cases, Germany, for example, construction businesses, contractors, don't even have the labor force to work more quickly or more intensively. I'm not surprised by the development we are seeing. At the beginning of the year, we expected such a development. We were not particularly euphoric as far as Europe goes. Others may have been, but not we. Of course, Europe is heterogeneous as regards infrastructure and construction developments, and it's going to continue that way. We have created a Wienerberger business that is able to grow in this environment. That's the most important thing for us. Of course, there are factors which are not under our influence. We have to learn to live with that, and I think we have learned that, and we're going to do so not only in this quarter, but also in the coming quarters and coming years in order to achieve satisfactory organic growth. May I come back to the problem markets? So it's mainly Netherlands, France, Czech Republic, Hungary was mentioned as well. As regards France, I suppose it's going to take a while before France recovers given the general economic environment. The Netherlands, housing starts or housing permits, building permits, showed a more positive trend. The same holds for the Czech Republic and Hungary. Does this give rise to some hope for the second half of the year, or do you expect positive developments to set in not before 2015? Well, I don't want to create the impression of being a pessimist, nor is my colleague Willy van Riet. There is always hope. We believe that in the Netherlands, and this is a conclusion we have been drawing on a long-term basis, and when I say long-term, I mean 40 years, housing starts are down to an all-time low since 1945. It's the lowest number of housing starts ever in the Netherlands. This can't be maintained at that level. We do feel, and this is more psychological than based on absolute figures, the bottom has been reached, and I think the situation will be better next year. I wouldn't expect a relaxation in the second half of the year yet, because it takes a while. People need to get finance for their construction projects. They need to obtain approvals and permits, so it takes a while. So for the Netherlands, I would say I see a certain relaxation coming in 2015 and after. France is different. I feel emotionally very close to France, but this country is politically driven, particularly in housing construction. A lot will depend on what's going to happen at the political level after the next presidential elections. There are going to be initiatives, construction projects, and changes. So France is, of course, under pressure, but things are going to happen at the political level. They will have to happen, because otherwise people won't be re-elected. So stimulus programs will have to be launched there. As regards Central and Eastern Europe, the Czech Republic is under considerable pressure and at a low level, because for quite some time the situation was unstable, politically speaking. Once that has improved, there will be a higher housing construction activity. Hungary, I think we have experts in the room who could say something on that. I would not venture to make a statement on Hungary. Something is going to happen at one point in time, and housing construction will pick up, but I don't know when. When you talk to government representatives, they're aware of the fact that they have to do something. Are they going to do it or not? I don't know. And now on to the more positive markets. Poland, you started up production lines that had been mothballed in Poland. What are the competitors doing? Are they also increasing their capacity because there is more demand than in recent years? And are you worried about price increases? Because if I understood you correctly, price increases were possible mainly in the United Kingdom. Do you think that you will have to lower your prices again? Well, it's a two-part question. As regards Poland, we didn't start up huge capacities because the development of the market that's happening there is can easily be covered with existing capacities, so no issue in Poland. In the United Kingdom, we have a market that is dominated by two bigger and one smaller competitor. Industry has reduced its capacities, closed down capacities for good, and it was important for us to act quickly. We imported a lot from Belgium and the Netherlands into the United Kingdom, and we also took measures to increase our local capacities. I'm not worried about prices in the UK because all we did was catch up for what we were never able to do in recent years. Our earnings level was very low in the UK, so we've taken a step in the right direction. And as I said, new housing starts at 160,000 units. This is not yet a tremendous boom, but it should be a sustainable trend. Well, in the United States, the price level and demand are not at a boom level yet. But when you look at the difference between revenue growth and volume growth was 16%, but revenues went down under considerable price pressure in the US. It's still far from a boom level. I'd like to make 2 points here. Industry in the United Kingdom had adjusted much more strictly to demands, not so in the United States. And of course, delivery distances are smaller. Shipment distances are smaller in the UK. You have a much more local market structure. In the US, products are transported over longer distances, and therefore competitors are not always behaving rationally in the US. Would you say you can see a general trend towards urban housing? Are people moving into towns? And will that have an impact on your product range? Well, there is a trend in urban housing. When you look at Austria, the residential construction is happening mainly in Vienna because the projects in the federal provinces of Austria are relatively small. A company like ours is focusing both on infrastructure segments like pipes and the new types of bricks for multi-story buildings. And we can see a trend in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg in Germany, a trend towards brick buildings. And it's up to us to show the market that it's possible to build multi-story buildings with bricks. Of course, it will never be a 35-floor building. We can use bricks there to fill in the spaces between the steel frame, as we do in Russia and India. But I think we can make do in Western Europe with our products. Thank you very much for your attendance. I hope to see you again at future Wienerberger events. Thank you very much.